The USMCA, or NAFTA 2.0, is just that, a renegotiation of the devastating NAFTA that decimated jobs, wages, livelihoods, and more in the US as well as in Mexico. With regards to climate, and indeed every aspect of our lives, from healthcare to food, USMCA is but a flimsy new slogan on an old, rotten trade deal that once again places profit over people and planet. For more, Margaret Flowers of Popular Resistance and Trade for People and Planet has the details. Take a look.
Well, one industry that really wins out in the new NAFTA is the fossil fuel industries. So basically, if the United States wants to transport gas or oil to Mexico, we can't use it. It's automatically granted. It's like there's no barriers. There's no way that we could stop it. The fossil fuel industry also has, there's certain industries that aren't going to be allowed to use the investor-state dispute settlement, which is, for your listeners, basically where corporations can sue governments if they pass laws that interfere with their business or their profit. And so while other industries are not going to be able to use that anymore, the fossil fuel industry gets to use it. So also, there's no kind of environmental enforcement. So if a polluting industry wants to move into Mexico, from the U.S., because we won't let them pollute here, they can go pollute there. So that's a big winner for that industry, which is very sad these days, given climate change and all that.
And there's also no mention of climate change in the entire agreement.
Yes, just like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's the new trend. I don't know of a trade agreement that ever mentioned climate change. Agriculture, big ag is going to win out big on this. Well, one is basically the food inspection is going to be very lax, and corporations have a lot of flexibility to not have their foods inspected when they pass across the border. Country of origin labeling is not going to apply in the new NAFTA. Companies like Monsanto, there's a lot of ability for GMOs to be used and things like that. Pharmaceutical industries are going to win out really big because of the patent protections and the ability for them to, if they patent a drug, and usually those patents are for a limited time, but under this, they can do what's called evergreening, where if they come up with a new method of delivery or a new indication, like you take this for headaches, but now we understand it also works for earaches, so we're going to renew the patent. Right. And so that really prevents generics, and there are other barriers to generics as well. And so the cost of medicines are going to, be able to stay very high under this.
So does the ISDS apply to the pharmaceutical industry in this?
So right now, the only industry it's a certain time period. It's like in Mexico, after 3 years, ISDS goes away for all but the fossil fuel industry. But there's this big kind of gaping, and other sectors of industry also can be included. Gotcha. So we don't really know what that means.
It's vague.
It's vague, and usually when they make it vague, it's because they have that big loophole that they can slip the other corporations in there. But what's interesting now is that things are changing, and I'm not sure if corporations even need ISDS anymore. There was a case where a Canadian mining company, Venezuela, kicked them out of the country. They sued Venezuela in a U.S. court for the losses that they incurred as a result of that. And
outside
the US,
of ISDS?
Right. This was just a regular court. And the U.S. court ruled that they could give whatever assets Venezuela had through Citgo in the United States to the Canadian company to pay them back.
Wow. So,
yeah, that's a whole new area, I think, where I imagine that we'll see more of that.
Which is interesting because ISDS, that particular point that ISDS won't apply to everyone after an amount of time, is one of the things that several organizations have come out and said, oh, well, this will give us the chance to make NAFTA better, as opposed to saying, oh, no, this is still a terrible deal. Talk about that particular issue, that some organizations are seeing that as this sort of like carrot as so as to think that, oh, we can actually make this better.
Right. I mean, one thing that past trade agreements were able to get through because certain sectors of society, environmental groups, labor, whatever, would give them cover, would say, oh, well, we got this in the deal. Right. So, and that confuses people, right? Because now they're seeing this organization saying that they support it. That started to happen during the Trans-Pacific Partnership fight, and we were able to push back and say no, even if there was that little bit of good. Like labor was saying, well, if you put in these certain labor standards, then we would support it. But what good are labor standards if there's no mechanism to enforce them? So there was one particular organization, Public Citizen, that worked very hard with the U.S. Trade Representative Office to try to improve the language around ISDS, and I think that they are, they feel like they got something there. But we still look at the whole agreement and say, no, this is bad overall. Even with that, it's still not going to fix what we want. Plus, we really have to send a message to the lawmakers, whoever they may be, that we're not going to tolerate this model of trade anymore. That it's been proven over and over now for almost 30 years that this is bad for people on the planet, and we need a new trade model that actually raises up standards, has enforcement mechanisms, and we could do a lot of good through a trade agreement if we had like strong regulations on climate change or strong regulations on worker protections. We could actually halt the race to the bottom in wages and working conditions and start to lift it up for everyone.
And I want to talk about, because one of the things that you work on also is the Medicare for All fight. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, how would something like this affect that ability to move forward if pharmaceuticals have these laws protecting them?
This is a big concern. I mean, this was a concern under the Trans-Pacific Partnership because countries that were involved in the TPP were ones that had some of the best healthcare systems in the world, so Australia, Japan, and part of the way that they keep their healthcare costs low is by being able to negotiate with the pharmaceuticals and set the prices. And what the Trans-Pacific Partnership basically said was, well, if you're going to negotiate prices, you have to also include our marketing cost, which for pharmaceuticals is like one of the biggest chunks. It's much bigger than research and development. And so that would automatically lift those prices up, and also just giving them more power to negotiate in those situations, and the fact that you can't do generics. And so this places a big burden on the cost of the healthcare system. And that could be a problem in the United States as well if we get Medicare for All.
So talk about, because I've been mentioning NAFTA, NAFTA 2.0, but it's really going by the name, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement.
Right.
Talk about this rebranding. Is it similar to like Monsanto now being a part of Bayer?
Right, absolutely. Yeah. NAFTA has a terrible reputation. People know that it caused, hundreds of thousands of jobs to leave the United States, that it decimated the Mexican economy, particularly the agricultural sector, and drove people off of their farms and into the cities, and drove migration into the United States as people were desperate. And so yeah, of course, this is like typical, right? So we don't want to say NAFTA. So, right. But U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement sounds really great. Like we're all friends, and
we agreed on something.
Yeah.
That sounds
and
cool.
If people don't know that that's actually the new name for NAFTA, then they won't have those bad, associations with it.
And talk about where we're at right now, because it seems like this is happening now for a reason, because Mexico has an incoming leftist president, which it doesn't sound like he would be pro this agreement. So where are we at right now in terms of the specific timing of this?
Yeah, so people probably know that the current president, Peña Nieto, is a right-wing neoliberal, and so this agreement was negotiated under his administration. So the last day that Peña Nieto is going to be in power is November 30th, and that's the day that the agreement is going to be signed in Argentina by all three presidents. Trudeau will be there as well. And it's interesting because Lopez Obrador, the new incoming president of Mexico, has all these plans, apparently, and we'll see, if he actually realizes them. Are these just campaign promises? But he wants to do a lot to improve food security in Mexico for people. And that's an area that could be seen as a threat to corporate profits. Absolutely. And corporations could sue Mexico over wanting to actually feed their people. So,
yeah, because NAFTA completely decimated the campesinos and the ability for folks to make a living off of the land in Mexico. So that's,
yeah.
that would be a huge threat.
And the people that write these agreements are really, to be honest, ruthless. I was able to overhear a conversation back during the Trans-Pacific Partnership days. It was staff members of the Ways and Means Committee, USTR, U.S. Trade Representative staff, and industry staff. And they were talking about the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And one of the things they were like almost gloating about is that they got a provision into the TPP where countries are required, if there's a deal for them to export a certain amount of food, that within the TPP it said that if you don't, even if you have like starvation and drought going on in your country, you are still required to meet your quotas for exports. So you can't say, I'm sorry, we need to actually keep that food here, our people are dying. You still have to export that. And they thought that was great that they won that. And that just gives you a sense of, where their priorities are.
Of who these people are who are writing this.
Yeah, there was other stuff they said that was just absolutely crazy as well.
And so you mentioned TPP. Talk about how this, because I feel like one of the big wins that Popular Resistance and Trade for People and Planet really had a big role in was stopping TPP. That was a big win. And so I feel like that might still be fresh in people's minds with regards to, wow, this is such an enormous global trade deal that really so pointedly puts profit over people and planet. Talk about the similarities between TPP and the new NAFTA so that people can kind of make that connection in their minds.
Yeah, well, some of the language from the TPP was put into the new NAFTA. So the language around pharmaceutical patents, around ISDS, around regulations. There's this... I think they call it regulatory coherence. And basically it means that if a government is getting ready to make some new laws that might impact the profits of corporations, they have to allow those corporations to know ahead of time as they're writing the law, which gives them an opportunity to then lobby the lawmakers and make sure that that language is written to their favor. So it gives them an advantage that civil society doesn't get to have.
And like we saw around TPP, the issue of fast track, that maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, but what does that mean for this deal as well?
Right, so fast track was passed under President Obama and it still is in effect, and basically the technical name for it is Trade Promotion Authority, but most people refer to it as fast track because it basically means that the administration goes out, signs the agreement. They are required to provide to Congress a listing of how it will impact the various laws, and then they send it to Congress to ratify the agreement, and they basically have 90 days to do the whole thing. So reading a very complex trade agreement and understanding it, they are limited to about 20 hours of debate. They aren't allowed to change it in any way, and then they're required to vote on it within a certain timeline. So this is a very anti-democratic process. Once it hits that, it's hard to stop because in the past, a lot of the agreements have gotten through with just 1 or 2 votes. Right. And there's a lot of arm twisting that goes on. So we really need to, and hopefully people do have that memory of the Trans-Pacific Partnership and are ready to mobilize again, because we've got to very quickly make people aware of this and have them make their members of Congress aware that they're opposed to this, and hopefully make it so politically unpalatable that they don't even want to submit it to Congress because they know that they're going to lose.
And one of those points there that would make this incredibly powerful for people is to, like we talked about earlier, this is really every walk of life. It's labor rights, it's healthcare, it's food sovereignty, it's climate change. So it's so many of people's primary issues that they're working on all rolled into one that would greatly affect their ability to do their organizing work. So.
Yeah. I mean, just think about polluting industries and fossil fuel industries. If they want to come into your community because they're going to, extract gas or oil or build a pipeline to send it to Mexico, you have no recourse. Yeah. It's an automatic, it's automatically permitted. Yeah. So, people do need to feel that this is personal, and I think they did with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, understood how it undermines our rights to even protect our own communities.
Trade for People and Planet are organizing mass actions this weekend to draw attention to the signing of the USMCA and to get to work rekindling the opposition that crushed the TPP 2 years ago. To learn more about USMCA and to get involved this weekend and beyond, visit tradeforpeopleandplanet.org.